I'm glad you dialed into this presentation. So today I will talk about how we've been using machine learning to aid finding hydrocarbons. And we see this as a future exploration workflow that can be used by all geoscientists alike. So we've done many projects for oil companies, and the ones I can show are today examples from a project we did for the Norwegian Petroleum Directorate, the NPD, and also a large wells project we have done for the Oil and Gas Authority in the UK, and we give thanks to CGG for allowing us to show their seismic data. So first of all, I'd like to talk about the workflow at a high level sense. And we call this the digital underground. So starting from the left, we have EarthBank, and this is really a data repository. It's where we throw all the data in to the software EarthNET. We put in data, for example, there's well logs, core data. Of course, our seismic data goes in here, any production data, cultural data, oil shows data, gas logs, for example. And it's also a place where we do our log QC. It's where we can edit out parts of logs. If it's a poor log response, we can do that. So in this data bank, we are in the position of gaining a machine learning ready data set. So once we have that data set in place, we're able to do our predictions at well scale, top left. Our features are the wireline logs, and our labels are the CPIs of, for example, porosity, water saturation, and lithology labels gleaned from completion logs, for example. We then train our models, and once we're happy with our models and it's been through a geological sense check, we can then predict on the whole of the data set, which gives us predictions of, for example, water saturation, porosity, and lithology. These predictions are then used as labels along with the CPIs in our seismic scale predictions. So these predictions and the CPIs are used as labels, and our features are the different angle stacks. For example, far, ultra far, mid, near, full, and we also have a velocity cube as well. We train our models, and once we're happy with those models, again, gone through a geological sense check, we can apply it to the whole of the seismic survey. And the figure that you see is a water saturation cube for the Troll field in the Norwegian sector, and you can see it's predicted the hydrocarbons easily, or very nicely. We can also do automated seismic interpretation, the prediction of horizons using machine learning, and we can also extract faults using machine learning and use those in our exploration workflows. The last module, volumetrics and uncertainty. This is a module that's coming along. Of course, it's how do we go about coping with the uncertainty of our predictions in the risking domain? Also, how does that influence the volumetrics that we can produce? But that module is coming later on. Applications. I think well scale applications. I think I've discussed before is the prediction of hydrocarbon pay fundamentally, and it's also identifying potential missed pay intervals in well bores. Seismic scale, we're producing a lithology cube, a porosity cube, and a water saturation cube. And we're also verifying these against known accumulations. These are our hard calibration points. And of course, what we're really wanting is to find those additional resources around producing assets or close to existing infrastructure. I think we can help in license rounds by doing basin or sub-basin screening. Using this methodology, it can be done fairly rapidly, and it can focus the geoscientists to particular areas, for example, or particular prospects which might come out. It can also be used in applications as well. Of course, it can be used in farmings and farm outs. Farmings, of course, you can do it before you go to a farming to see if there's any hydrocarbon anomalies in the area that you're farming in as upside. And of course, as farming out, you don't want to farm out where there's potential anomalies present. Of course, all oil companies struggle with portfolio rejuvenation, and I believe we can use this methodology to aid that process along. I want to talk about 1D pay prediction now, a world scale. Just so we're up front about hydrocarbon pay, it's a port of a reservoir that contains economically producible hydrocarbons. Of course, this differs from formation to formation, and different companies will have different cutoffs. But this is the Grosbeak Field and our predictions of lithology. The Brent group shows abundance of sandstone. We have reservoir-style porosity being predicted, and we have a water saturation curve showing low water saturations in that hydrocarbon bearing interval. So that is fundamentally pay. And this is what we're trying to predict is pay intervals. I want to show you an example up front so you get used to the way that we are presenting the data and are predicting curves. This is well 211-16B7 in the UK sector. The 211 quadrant is a prolific hydrocarbon producing block with many billion barrel discoveries. On the far left, we have lithology prediction showing us sandstones in the Brent group. Our blue curve is our predicted porosity, and our red curve is the predicted water saturation, and then we have a pay flag based upon various cutoffs we've used for porosity and water saturation. So what's interesting here is that we are predicting reservoir-style porosities in the Brent group, and we are predicting low water saturations in the Brent group as well. So this well was drilled in 1991 by Mobil, and this was classified on the Oil and Gas Authority website as a dry hole. And it seems quite surprising that this was classified as a dry hole, because it seems that pay intervals are being predicted. We went into the Oil and Gas Authority website. We then searched on this well, the 211-16B 7 well, and we found a relinquishment report by Zeno, who concluded there was probably an oil column in this well. The well is to the south here, where the cursor is. Zeno concluded that the depths of the oil down to, or the free level water up to, or beyond the limit of the local fault bound closure, indicating a much larger trap extending northwards. And you see this in the yellow dotted line. So what's interesting is that what was mispay to me was definitely not mispay to Zeno. So this term mispay, of course, is relatively ambiguous. Possible reasons for mispay. This is not an exhaustive list at all, but just a few points I've put down. I guess you could come out with a few points yourself. Start off with old wells and old technology. There may be an old gamma ray, an old density or DT log. We can then predict density or DT using machine learning, and then we can use that in the predictions. Poor hole conditions and casing points can hinder interpretations of CPIs and the logs, collection of the data. Could be focused on larger hydrocarbon accumulations, and therefore they're missed pay. And with this methodology, you might be able to highlight and identify those. Loss of knowledge and experience. If people leave companies go out of basins, companies go out of countries, and with that, the knowledge is lost. But if you do large projects like the one I'm going to show you today on the wells and the seismic, is that you then hold that knowledge in one project. And of course, like I showed you with that the 211-16B7 well, there may be errors in databases. I'm sure Mobil probably didn't classify that well as a dry hole, but it was in the database on the OGA as a dry hole. So those errors might lead you in wrong directions. And I want to talk about the 1D well scale workflow for pay prediction. First of all, we're building a data bank of data, as I showed you, with the wireline logs, the CPIs, the labels from the lithology. And the project we did for the Oil and Gas Authority contained over 5,000 wells. And you can see the wells to the right here, stretching across the northern North Sea on the UK and the Norwegian sector. First of all, after we've taken the data into EarthBank, we are then doing multi-well and single well editing. So we're getting our machine learning ready data set in place, and of course we're doing various QCs. And I should talk a little bit in more detail about that. Once we have those QC logs in place, we are in the game now of constructing our models and applying them, and to produce our porosity, water saturation, and multi-class lithology predictions. And once we have those elements in place, then we can go and calculate net reservoir for a formation. We can then calculate the average net to gross. We can also identify pay and calculate the average water saturation of that pay, for example. So once we have all these pay intervals, it's all about classification of the pay and how we use and visualize and rank these pay classes. Data quality control. This is a very important step. The adage of rubbish in, rubbish out, I think is prevalent in these machine learning projects. So we've developed a series of modules to be able to clean your logs and to identify anomalous data patterns in that log. And you can understand, if we're dealing with 5,000 wells, exploration and production wells from the UK and Norway, we really need to be able to delve into our data in detail. We need to identify those anomalies and take them out. And although I'm not saying we have a perfect data set, clean data set, at least we are going some way to clean that data and take out anomalous data patterns. First of all, we always keep the original data. Mistakes are made in editing, and we can always go back to the original data and bring it back and edit it again. We're removing non-physical values. So what we do is we can despike the curves, or we can take minus numbers away, for example. And we can do this in a few clicks of a button. We just set the ranges that we'd like to keep, and we can then extract those spikes. We also have a module where we're able to take out straight lines and diagonal interpolation of logs. That's done in a few clicks of a button. And we're also identifying anomalous data patterns, which I'll talk about in a minute in more detail with these plots on the left-hand side. We can do multi-well and single well editing. We can take out certain sections of logs on many wells, or we can do it just on single wells. And we can create a whole condition flag based upon bit size and caliper log. Give us a kind of a heads up on where we could expect problem areas, for example, for your density log or your DT. So flag anomalous data patterns. If we look at the XY plots on the left-hand side, we have DT versus measured depth. And you can see here that the majority of the data lies on a regional trend, but some data lies off that. We can then see which wells this data comes from. We can see that it was input into the wrong units. We correct the units and it flips and it goes on to the regional trend. Also, in the upper sections, we can identify anomalous patterns here, straight lines within the logs. We can see where that is put in the different units or whether that is just a poor log response, and we can strip that away. So once we have our machine learning ready data set in place, we're in the position now to create our models. And I won't go into the details of how we create our models. We can have another session on that. But at a high level, we are using, of course, gamma ray, resistivity, density, sonic, and the neutron log, and our label is porosity. So we can create models, and the blue line, the green line is our label, and the red line is our prediction. So you can see that although not perfect, it's a pretty good match between prediction and label. So once we have the models in place, we can then apply these to the larger data set. So we have a philosophy that not one model will give you the absolute truth. The model will give you an element of the truth, but not see all of the truth. So therefore, if we have many models and many curves, we are having more robust predictions of, for example, porosity and water saturation. So in this project where we did the 5,000 wells, we had 4 models differing in the label sets that were used. So we created 4 curves. And you can see these 4 curves predicted for the porosity and the water saturation. We also predicted lithology, and we used majority voting in that place to get an idea as to the lithology present. But with the porosity and water saturation, what we did do is we summed these up to give a mean and a standard deviation. So that porosity curve, that predicted porosity curve you see in blue, is a mean of the 4 porosity curves that were predicted for this well, the 2, 11, 25, 1 well. We do that, of course, for the water saturation, and we also have a standard deviation away from that mean, which really gives us a heads up on how well the predictions are doing for certain formations. For example, in the active formation, where the cursor is, with low standard deviation, we are seeing pretty good on all 4 models. But you go to the nest formation, there is some variability there with high standard deviations. So it gives us an idea as to if the nest was our focus, then we may want to go back and we may want to work on those models to create better predictions. So once we have those curves in place, we are now in the game of classifying pay. So what we've done here is what I call static pay classes. So I've taken the water saturation values and the porosity values and applied different cutoffs to give pay class 1 through to 5 and a non-pay class. And what we've done in the map diagram here is I've loaded up all dry wells from the UK in our project. You can get this from the OGA website. And then what I've done is I've also said, give me pay class 1 and 2, and I just press apply. So what we have here in the diagram is dry wells that contain pay class 1 and 2. So this was interesting because there seems to be quite a few wells which contain pay in these dry wells. Now the pay resolution that we're able to predict is down to, because log scale, which is about 15 centimeters. So the height of the column gives you the average height or depth of those pay classes. So I think what we're giving you here is information that you can then extract. You can look and see whether you actually believe that pay class or not. So we're not saying that is a pay class definitely. What we're doing is we're giving you the information to say, okay, this looks interesting. Do I believe that pay class? You can look at the logs. You can do in wellbore plot, pay, and then water saturation, porosity, and all the different other logs that go into those predictions and see whether there's any problems in the logs. You of course have the bad hole flag as well to see whether the bad hole condition is potentially influencing that pay class. So it kind of gives you the information to focus in, then you can place it in geological context as well. So now the proof of the pudding, of course, is in the eating and the examples that we find. So what I've done here is I was always interested in finding hydrocarbons around existing fields, or in this case, a billion barrel oil discovery. So what I've done here is I've taken all the wells in the Brent Field. These are exploration and production wells. The well bore along the x-axis and on the y-axis is depth in TVD RKB. The green lines are where we have pay, predicted pay, and I've just run the regional oil water contacts that you find in the Brent Field, and they seem to match quite nicely. But what I'm interested in is the pay zones below the stat field. And you can see here in several wells there's pay below the stat field group. And I want to take well 21129 A17 drilled in 82. We then move to the wellbore plot on the upper right, predictions of lithology, porosity, water saturation. We have a pay flag and we have the whole condition flag. What we see is that we're able to identify the oil water contact in the Brent group quite nicely. We go down to the stat field group, which shows lower water saturations but no pay. But what's interesting for me is these two intervals in the Cormorant formation. We have sands being predicted, reservoir style porosities, we have low water saturations, and is this kind of a smoking gun for a 50 million barrel discovery further up dip, for example? So this is interesting. Of course, we know that the facilities have been removed from the Brent Field, but I think the concept holds well to try and find oil in around billion barrel fields or assets that are already. Now I want to just talk about missed pay analytics. So of course we're producing all of these pay zones, and how do we go about using them? How do we go about rationalizing it and seeing what we have? So what we have here is I've plotted pay interval thickness on a logarithmic scale and average water saturation on the in a logarithmic scale. We have a preponderance or a high abundance of small pay intervals, which maybe you'd expect, but we also have some wells showing us larger pay intervals. Now, I don't think we're saying that all of these intervals that we've predicted as pay are actually hydrocarbon bearing. But I think what we do is we give you data to take and place into a geological context, and actually whether you believe it or not. It's got to make geological sense fundamentally. But also we see there is no unique solution here, I think. We can have a 1 meter pay interval, which will lead to a 100 million barrel discovery up dip. Or as I showed in the 21116 B7 well, you can have potential pay zone of 50 meters, for example. 3D pay prediction. So this is the really interesting part of the presentations where we're predicting away from the wellbore, the business end of what we do. So our 3D property prediction workflow. First of all, we're taking we perform well tie, a very important part of the procedure to get that well tie correct. We're then using upscaling methods to go into the seismic domain. Of course, we're producing labels or water saturation porosity logs on a 15 centimeter scale, and these have got to be upscaled into seismic scale. We're then building training sets of data, and we're using the neural networks to train the models. And once we're happy with those models and they make geological sense, then of course we are then applying those models to the larger seismic area. In the diagram to the right, you see the troll field. This is a water saturation cube, and although not perfect, we can see here oil within the Upper Jurassic Sommer field group picked up quite nicely. And this is where cursor is also part of the troll field. Do we really believe these sections here? I would have to question these. So I suppose what I'm saying is, there is no silver bullet here. We're not, so exact just to predict the troll field. So there is a way here to improve our models. Oh, what's interesting here is this compartment to the far east. This is undrilled. You may want to question whether this compartment actually contains hydrocarbons. So I'm going to show you examples now. We can talk about the methodology of actually physically how we do the model training, maybe in a later session, or you can have some one-on-ones. I want to show you the examples so you get an idea as to what can be expected from this type of methodology. I want to talk about the Grosbeak Discovery. The Grosbeak Discovery is an intra header. Sorry, it's an intra Jurassic discovery in the Sandstones formation in this location here. The discovery well is 3512-2. We are predicting sands in the Sandstones formation, and we're also predicting sands in the Ness formation. And this is what you find in this well here. We're predicting reservoir-style porosities in the Sandstones and also in the Ness formation, and within the fence field here where cursor is. And we have low water saturations in the Sandstones and also in the Brent. And fundamentally, this is what we find in the well we're predicting. So how do we go in the 3D seismic domain away from wellbore? So the red line is the well. I put on the label. We can see here that we use in the training. So we're predicting hydrocarbons in the Sandstones formation away from the wellbore, also within the Ness formation as well. We can do a time slice and we get an idea as to the outline of the discovery. I think what's interesting for me is we don't see anomalies all over the seismic line. I show more seismic lines later in this area. It seems to be concentrated where we would expect to find it in a known discovery, maybe down here. Next formation. This is the Upper Jurassic as well. A regional seismic line in the same area. This is Grosbeak, where cursor is in the map. I'll show you some regional seismic lines. This is a lithology prediction cube. Starting from the top of the line, we see injectites being discovered, being predicted, and we also have injectites within the Varda formation here, where cursor is. The yellow is sand and the green is claystone. We also see within the blue is the base Cretaceous, and we see sands within the Upper Jurassic here. And of course, we see sand within the Middle Jurassic as well. This dotted line is the discovery well for the Byrding field. It is 3511-13. And I'll talk about that in more detail. Same seismic line, but the porosity cube. The lighter colours are high porosities or higher porosities, and the darker are lower porosities. So what we see here, just below the BCU, we see higher porosities in the Upper Jurassic being predicted, and these coincide with our sand distribution. Our water saturation cube. This is the discovery well. The black line is the discovery well for the Byrding. And we can see here where cursor is the Byrding discovery. And what's interesting, I'll talk about this later on, is that it just missed this hydrocarbon anomaly that we found just below the BCU in the Draupne formation. And also what I want you to notice is the lack of anomalies across the area here. If we found lots of hydrocarbon anomalies, then maybe our confidence in the water saturation model would not be so high, but it seems to be performing quite well in this area. Now I want to focus in on the Byrding discovery, the 3511-13 well. It was drilled in 2005, and it's this. If we look at the map, the insert map, it is the red dot here. So this was the discovery well. So we predicted intra-header formation sandstones, where there was intra-header formation sandstones discovered. And also we need to notice these two sands in the Draupne formation that we predict here. The intra-header formation sands show reservoir-style porosities and a low water saturations at the top of those sands, fundamentally in the right location. We have paid here. But also in these intra-Draupne formation sands, we have reservoir style porosities and we have lower water saturations, and one's being recognised as K. I want you to notice, I want you to remember those for later on. This is a focus in on the Byrding discovery using the lithology, having the lithology prediction cube. What you to notice here is this Intra header, where we find the sands has been predicted away from the wellbore. Not perfect, of course, but we do have indications away from the wellbore here. I want you to think about, look at these sands within the Draupne formation here. Same seismic line, porosity, cube. Within the Intra header, finding higher porosities, and also within the Draupne formation, we're finding higher porosities here. Water saturation cube. Again, I showed you this anomaly here, this hydrocarbon anomaly. And what's interesting, when you go from anomaly to no anomaly, we're about 30 milliseconds off what it was reported in the well. But also we see this anomaly just below the VCU in the Draupne here, and that's interesting. So what we're looking for in kind of oil exploration is looking at a consistent story, and a consistent story gives credibility to our predictions and also the credibility of having oil in place. So we're predicting sand. That sand has higher porosities, and of course we are predicting hydrocarbons in that interval. So it just gives us credibility and credence that our models are performing well. Now I want you to concentrate on the Draupne formation sandstones that I showed you before. Again, these two sandstone layers in the Draupne formation, reservoir style porosities, low water saturation. If you look on the seismic insert to the far right, they're going to be in about this location where cursor is. Are these smoking guns to this larger anomaly we see? So in 2017, the operator of this license drilled a production well through this Intra Draupne sand, and they proved 20 meters of oil-filled Draupne sand. So fundamentally, they found hydrocarbons in this anomaly. But what was interesting for me is that the discovery well was drilled in 2005, and they could have sidetracked that discovery well to prove up those hydrocarbons and not wait fundamentally 12 years to find it. And we can only speculate why the operator didn't do that, but if you were armed with this data, it will be an obvious decision to make to utilize your route time more effectively. Just some very concluding remarks here. I think I've showcased an ML-driven workflow for hydrocarbon exploration. I think it could be used as an exploration accelerator. It's used to focus geoscientists into where they can potentially find hydrocarbons, and then they bring their expertise to the table and say, does this make geological sense or not? I think the workflow can be easily embraced by all explorationists alike, and I think we provide software that can empower explorationists to do projects themselves. Predictions of lithology, porosity, and water saturation, both at well scale and seismic scale, away from wellbore. And of course, what's important when we do the 3D property prediction is we are predicting hydrocarbons in existing accumulations, and this gives us credibility or credence that the models are performing well. And of course, what we're really looking for is hydrocarbon pockets that have not been drilled. And machine learning projects such as this are data thirsty, and they work well in exploration in mature areas around existing producing assets where there's lots of data, production data, exploration data, good seismic has been collected. We can also do unexplored plays in a mature area, but I'll talk about that a little later on. So great, thank you, Sarah. That concludes